as the viewers may or may not know, I'm a huge football fan and a huge Chelsea supporter. I've supported them my entire life, and it's because I liked the colour blue when I saw it. But as part of a massive clampdown on Russian oligarchs in the UK, Chelsea owner Roman Abramovich has been forced to put the club up for sale. He tried to get around this by passing on the stewardship to Chelsea's charitable foundation trust, but because of intensifying sanctions and pressure, he's been forced to put the club up for sale anyway for £3 billion, I'm led to believe, if you happen to have that lying around.
Bargain price.
Yeah, we can confirm today that he has since had his assets frozen entirely. Abramovich has owned the club since 2003, which inaugurated the most successful era in Chelsea's history. They've proceeded to win everything there is to be won, accumulating, so I believe 5 Premier League titles, 2 Champions Leagues, most recently last year's Champions League, and more recently than that, a Club World Championship, among several other FA Cups and League Cups over the years too.
He's just boasting because it's.
I'm just boasting because it's my team. But nonetheless, it is a genuinely sad day. But if we move on to the Telegraph article, you can see Roman Abramovich has put Chelsea up for sale, while astonishingly confirmed that he will not ask for his £1.5 billion loan to the club to be repaid, and will donate all net proceeds to the victims of the war in Ukraine. So take note of that.
That's multi-billion.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So
even for a billionaire, that's big.
Yeah, for someone who is, supposed to be a close friend of Vladimir Putin, or close associate of Vladimir Putin, that is quite a commitment.
Quite remarkable, yeah.
It is. But if we scroll down a bit, Labour leader Keir Starmer used Wednesday's PMQs to question Prime Minister Boris Johnson over why Abramovich had not yet been sanctioned, but the fact he's prepared to make a huge donation from the sale of Chelsea to those impacted by Russia's invasion of Ukraine could ensure that his assets are not frozen or seized, at least in the short term. Well,
that was wrong.
That was wrong,
3
clearly.
hours ago, I think Liz Truss announced that they were frozen.
Yes. So if that was indeed his intention, it hasn't worked. But in a statement released on Wednesday evening, Abramovich said himself, "As I have stated before, I have always taken decisions with the club's best interest at heart. In the current situation, I have therefore taken the decision to sell the club, as I believe this is in the best interest of the club, the fans, the employees, as well as the club's sponsors and partners." That's, of course, the partners, I think, would take serious issue if he didn't at this point. News broke today that, again, actually I've said that already, a lot of Chelsea fans, myself included, are rather upset. Not because I don't think it's the right thing to do. I fully understand why. But it does mark the end of...
But I must point out, what has Abramovich done directly to cause the conflict in Ukraine?
The question is how he got his wealth in the first place.
But you could make the same argument, not just for the Russian oligarchs, but the Ukrainian oligarchs, the Chinese oligarchs, the Saudi Arabian billionaires. But so the moral case for this, I think, while I can understand why people are doing it, I don't think the moral case is as clear-cut as we would like to think.
No, it's not. And there does seem to be a bit of... Russophobia underwriting this a little bit. I mean, I did actually search for quotes from the Labour Party's insistence to actually clamp down on Russian oligarchs.
But I think Labour is more concerned about clamping down on rich people to begin with, because they have an ideological bent.
Yeah, but if
being rich is evil,
to the Labour Party, if you're Russian and you're rich, that means you must have got that money badly, or at least from the tone that they've been addressing this anyway.
To be honest, according to the historical record, that is probably likely. However, it's not.
Yeah, but does it apply to every single person?
And the fact that there is uneven treatment between oligarchs from the ex-Soviet countries on this matter gives the lie to that argument. I think.
Well, the truth is, I honestly don't know what Abramovich has done to get this money, or to be in the position that he is at all, or what it took for him to be considered as an ally to Vladimir Putin. All I do know is that as the owner of Chelsea, he's run the club in good faith. He's made substantial investments for the benefit of the club at a global level. He's provided me with many happy memories. I know that doesn't amount to much given what's happening in Ukraine at the moment, but for this reason, a lot of the Chelsea players have taken this view as well. One of whom was actually none other than ex-captain John Terry, who's over here, who actually called him the best. And for what he's done for the club, it's hard to refute that. But of course, this went down very, very badly with some, one of whom was Labour MP Chris Bryant, who said, "I think John Terry should take this down as soon as possible. The people of Ukraine are being bombed, shelled and murdered," which, while you celebrate Abramovich
is in the bomber planes, isn't he?
Yeah, right? I mean, this is just guilt by association, again, isn't it?
This is... this is really just demonising an ethnic
It's just
minority
another
at this
case of
point.
obnoxious moralising from Chris Bryant, and this isn't the worst thing he said on this matter.
Right.
Like before Putin even uttered the words, like when Boris Johnson made his first major address about this issue, he was speculating that this is this Hitler 2 that we're witnessing at the moment. But it's such an irresponsible thing to say at the moment.
Well, some people, particularly Labour MPs, they are some of the most mediocre minds in this country,
I know.
and they are on Twitter all the time. So they're
Yes.
just basically plugged in and creatures of this information network. So
Yeah.
when Twitter gets hysterical, they come out with terrible takes like this.
Yeah, but I mean, irrespective of it, I think that John Terry doesn't strike me as the most politically sensitive or aware fellow. So I think he deserves a little bit of a break. He's quite clearly looking at this from the position of his professional career. He's not making a political pro-Russian statement. So I think Chris Bryant needs to just drop this. He wasn't, of course. He was held to account for this. Thankfully, if we move on to the next. Where in response to someone who showed support for Terry, he said that he's the same MP that claimed fortunes and expenses of the taxpayers' money, also the same MP who voted that we invade Iraq. So actually, John Terry's actually turned out to be more politically aware than I thought. But where is he wrong? Well, the hypocrisy is pretty.
Yeah. So the MP actually does have agency in the bombing of Iraq.
Yes, he literally does.
And the destruction of that part of the world, leading to the creation of ISIS and the ongoing, over 10-year civil war.
Do we want to start contemplating the death toll of that?
So he is more responsible for death and war than Abramovich.
Yes.
Goodness me.
So he's in no position whatsoever to be telling John Terry the virtues he should be signalling. Yeah, I mean, you could argue that Chris Bryant was kind of caught up in Blair's misleading of the House. You could, but maybe that's the only thing I can say in his defence. But if we move on slightly, in Chelsea's latest match against Burnley, a section of the Chelsea supporters during the minute dedicated for expressing solidarity with Ukraine just before they take the knee were heard chanting Abramovich's name over the top. I thought you might want to hear this, so let's take a listen. So what you're hearing there, those applauding is expressing solidarity with Ukraine, that message up there. And what the Chelsea fans who are booing, I wouldn't go as far as saying that is enough to qualify as pro-Russian sentiment, but it's pretty, I think, disrespectful. I hate virtue signalling more than most people do, but I really don't think it's that I understand that they want to show appreciation for Roman Abramovich, and that platform has almost been taken away and glossed over by the situation in Ukraine. But that's not the time to do it. I don't think.
I do dislike the fact that every nook and cranny of life has to be turned over to the political issue of the day. And I'm very much sympathetic with Ukraine here. I have very little sympathy for Russia in this invasion. But having said that, where does it end? We covered earlier about Russian cats being banned from a cat fancying competition, things like that. Or when you go and play a hobby, or play chess, for example, should you have a minute silence for Ukraine before each game? It seems like an unacceptable horseshoeing in of geopolitics.
Fast
into
forward
people's
50
lives.
years, we're going to have a long list of virtue signals that we're going to need to carry out. One in favour of diversity and anti-racism, another in favour of Ukraine. Whatever comes of that, of course, is
and
still
whatever
unfolding.
other media narrative catches the public imagination.
Yes,
I
and
think
eventually that will be longer than the 90 minutes we actually have to enjoy the football.
Well, there is that possibility.
Yeah. So look again. I imagine that all of those things are underwriting the hostility that the Chelsea fans have to this. But I think
we can respect Chelsea fans, even though they're being disrespectful, for taking a stand in defence of essentially the neutrality of football and their right to view football through the lens of football fans.
Yes.
I don't think they have to view football through the eyes of geopoliticians. So I respect them to
Yeah,
that
but
degree.
I do think that Thomas Tuchel has got this right by saying that, look, it's just not the right moment to be doing this.
Sure.
He criticised the Chelsea fans for interrupting the moment of applause for Ukraine by singing about their billionaire Russian owner Roman Abramovich. Again, I'm citing this in the article. It's not the moment to do this to Chelsea. The Chelsea manager said of the chants that were heard from a significant contingent of the travelling support before the Premier League game against Burnley. He said, if we show solidarity, we should show solidarity together. And again, I think we'd both agree that that's problematic.
Yes, I'm not a fan of solidarity. I know some people, so Douglas Murray has spoken in defence of solidarity and asked why there's very little on the right and so on. But I think the concept of solidarity itself, a lot of it is very much just unthinking collectivism.
Yeah. But this is... but the Guardian have reported this, in effect, if I just proceed. The gesture, which was met by boos from the Burnley fans, marred a planned minute's applause for the Ukrainian people and felt particularly provocative, given that the Chelsea owner has as yet failed to condemn Vladimir Putin for his expansionist war in Ukraine.
So compelled speech, again,
Yes.
from the Guardian.
Look, if I'm being perfectly honest, I think Mr. Abramovich is either just trying not to get involved, or may even be fearing for his life if he says the wrong thing. Because let's not kid ourselves that, well,
I've covered
that sort of targeting
in my
has happened
research.
before.
I've
has
come
it not?
across a large number of assassinations of oligarchs and their henchmen and people related to them in the history of Russia, Ukraine, and their diaspora over the last 30 years. So, if I were him, yes, I probably would be fair.
Yeah, but besides, I mean, perhaps you can read, or you can read his position, or at least understand the presence of, or at least some nuance in his position, through what his daughter has apparently been saying. And again, I couldn't find any direct sources about this, but apparently on social media she's been like sharing like anti-war like sentiment and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And if she feels free enough to do that, and that she's not going to get a big, I don't know, spanking from her father or whatever, figuratively speaking, of course, does that not suggest that perhaps there is some genuine sympathy on Roman Abramovich's part? Like, again, I am speculating.
Potentially, but I mean, families do tend to have very different views when it comes to politics.
They do. But Tuchel proceeded to say, we also do this because of what we are as a club. We show respect and we need our fans to commit to this minute of applause in this moment. We do it for the people of Ukraine, and there is no second opinion about the situation.
No, there are.
No, there aren't.
Like, we are
Well,
not
as in,
robots. There are as
yes.
many opinions as there are people.
Yes.
And if that is not the case, then that means people are suffering from,
Yeah,
by definition, a psychic
I do
epidemic.
disagree with him on here. He's basically saying there is one narrative
I hate
we
that
must all
idea
get
for
behind
anything, really.
Yes,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. I mean, it's an uncontroversial point. He says anyway, they have our thoughts and our support, and we should stand together as a club. And I think we can all stand together and acknowledge just how tragic this situation is. But to say that we should get behind one idea of how that tragedy has unveiled,
The idea of
unfolded
cancelling people across the political spectrum simply because they're Russian, I find deeply distasteful.
Yeah, well, I would argue that's actually what's got us here, to a considerable degree. Anyway, would you like to see who's in contention to buy Chelsea?
Oh, go on then.
Yes. So let's have a look. Up to 10 parties interested, with most interest set to come from the United States. The states are most interested
We're
in
going
buying
to
Chelsea.
get... who are the owners of Man United?
The Glazers.
Glazers.
The Glazers, yes, who are quite literally sucking the capital out of the club and investing it in some stake they have in the NFL. I don't know. Like, it's such a tragic situation at Manchester United that I've always hated Manchester United and always will, but I'm actually feeling...
Cue the hate comment.
Cue the hate comments. But I actually feel sorry for Manchester United supporters on this issue, because they're genuinely sapping the lifeblood
Say
out
what
of
you
the
will
club.
about Roman Abramovich, he at least respected the football club as an institution.
Yes, he did. And he didn't invest in it for money. He invested it to launder money. Don't get me wrong, but
Right.
But he nonetheless did actually invest something in the community, in the club,
Right.
and actually made Chelsea one of the elite clubs in the world, to the point we were actually considered for the European Super League, as awful an idea as that was, of course. But that can't be said of the new breed of owners that's what we've seen of late, not least those who are most impassionately in favour of the European Super League, such as the owners of Liverpool. I think Manchester United were another one. I mean, I don't know how much you know about the European Super League.
Bits and bobs.
Bits and bobs. It basically would have completely severed itself off from all of the other sporting bodies and being just a standalone league with its own rules for all times. There would be no interaction with the Champions League because they would be ostracised from it.
Right.
No interaction with the domestic leagues or anything like that.
There's a lot of arguments here. To be honest, it probably deserves a podcast all of its own. But I can see several things. One of them being that the sort of island of these super high-paid professional teams seems a bit strange to me.
Well, it would have seen the death of the sporting element, actually, because well, for a start, it would have been an entirely monetary-driven decision. But secondly, you don't have the threat of relegation, and the threat of existential survival. It's inseparable from what we appreciate about the league format that we have. It would just be an entertainment business, and then there would be nothing because it would be entirely internal, almost like a totality in itself. It would become like wrestling.
Well, it seems to me
time,
like it would be a bit
because the entertainment value would transgress the sporting element.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. I also think that, well, we'll have to have this discussion another time, but fundamentally, I think the professionalisation of sport, which has mainly happened in the era of American hegemony following World War II, is something that I actually think I'm actually against, and I think most people don't really realise that this is even a discussion, because for me, sport is basically a British invention. We invented all of the sports, and now we get the privilege of losing at all of them. But we invented them, spread them all across the world, the various colonies, cricket, football, rugby, so on. And it was very much an amateur endeavour.
Do you think that the professionalisation of the game has led to it actually being taken away from civil society itself?
Absolutely. Like, football has recently become an elitist phenomenon.
Yes.
Like the whole crackdown and campaigns against football hooliganism. Yes, there's something admirable in that. But what they've largely done in many top clubs is that they've drained away the atmosphere and the soul of the area to turn it into just another sort of upper middle class global bureaucracy entertainment venue. Like, almost interchangeable with any other sports venue. The fact that the players of Chelsea, even, for example, have no connection to the area of Chelsea, they're just millionaire footballers who are talented.
At best, you'll get someone like Romelu Lukaku, who's Belgian, who has been a Chelsea supporter all his life and wears the bands with pride for that reason. But there's nothing geographical that cements him to that, which can't be said about, for example, John Terry and Frank Lampard, who grew up in the London area. And yes, Frank Lampard did have to leave West Ham to then identify with the west side of London, the better side of London. I'm sorry, but it's an objective fact. But nonetheless, that's what made that generation of Chelsea players actually so good, and so and almost what word made them legends.
But it does seem like the association in big name clubs between the players and the clubs is very, very arbitrary. The association is basically they were bought, they signed up.
Yes.
There's very little more to it than that. You get more atmosphere from smaller clubs, local clubs, places like Colchester or Cambridge.
Yes,
they have more of a connection. But
in clubs like that,
you
you almost feel as if the fans are actually on the pitch with you. Whereas in these huge stadiums where the stands are so far away, they almost feel permanently abstracted, and so it almost becomes. That has a transformative effect on how you perform and how you see it together. That I always think has been Arsenal's problem. Actually.
Now, the thing is, of course, people will point out that the game is far better now that the players are professionals, and that's almost
to a degree. To a degree, as in the quality of the game in that sense has got better because it's much more scientific, and they go to greater lengths than ever to ensure that the players have the right diet, they're physically fit, and that their heads in the right place.
This is fundamentally. There is something unnatural about this, and while it may work out for those who succeed, the John Terrys and the Frank Lampards and the Romelu Lukakus, there are many people who want to become footballers at a young age. They spend a huge amount of time and sometimes expense into trying to be footballers, and they don't get there. And this is especially true in other sports, such as, for example, table tennis, where international table tennis stars have quite often been trained to play table tennis from before they could walk properly.
Yeah.
And I feel like there are many lives sort of being destroyed by this constant funneling into this industry, this economy. And I feel like this would be better if it were not professional, if the best players of these sports had a day job, fundamentally.
Yes.
And I know that that's going to be an unpopular opinion. But I think that even if it reduces the quality, the playing skill, it increases the sporting spirit of the game.
I think that there was a stage when you had a perfect balance between the two extremes. As in when you actually go back to, what was it, 1993, when the Premier League actually came into existence. There was a time when, yes, you still had like the grassroots aesthetic that drew people to the game, but there was more money being pumped into it. You still, like the likes of Frank Lampard and John Terry, still very much kind of grew up and were trained within that dynamic that you talked about. But they had the interest at an entertainment level that actually allowed more people to watch it, allowed them to play with better players, and then you actually had this extraordinary synthesis.
Another thing that you did see during this time was a huge rise in diving, which, as far as I'm concerned, has made a lot of football just unwatchable.
Yeah.
And that's because the financial stakes are so high that just making a pathetic dive, if it gets you a free kick or a penalty that changes the game and changes the league,
that is a reflection of how, again, I suppose, market forces that have encroached in the game are actually having a transformative effect on the players. They earn so much money that whatever club they ultimately go to, they're fine. As in they literally, like Lionel Messi earns about £500 million a week after tax. That's insane for any job that you do. But that is the amount of money.
500 million, surely not.
No, sorry. No, 500,000 after tax.
Okay. Still.
Yeah, we're only 50 years away from that. Anyway, shall we wrap up by actually seeing who's actually on the shortlist to buy Chelsea Football Club?
Yes,
very
let's do
quickly.
that.
So let's scroll down a little bit. There is a genuine Chelsea fan actually interested, someone who I'd never actually heard of. A little bit more.
It's not Liz Truss, is it?
It's not Liz Truss, no.
It's not Bill Gates.
It's not Bill Gates. I did have a nightmare. So it's either Mushin Bayrak, Turkish businessman, Thomas Ricketts, chairman of Chicago Cubs, Nick Candy, who apparently is a property developer and Chelsea supporter. So he's probably the most promising. And the other is interesting. Is Conor McGregor, who I never realised.
Conor McGregor.
Yes, he's a Manchester United fan. So please no, not Conor McGregor. But yes, it is indeed. Whoever buys the club, it is the end of an era. I'd like to say, on an apolitical level, that is, not hold me to political account for this. Thank you, Mr. Roman Abramovich. It has been one hell of a wild ride, and, well, yeah, that's all for now on that.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as this premium podcast me and Carl did together on Eric Zamor and how he is perhaps the most based man alive. If you want to find out what else I'm putting out, you can follow me at Getter at Callum on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.